Well, now I see that we have some people joining us here, which is great. So we're going to kick this off in a minute or two. Just let everybody figure out their Zooms, their whatever's where we are at, so they can just work on that IT stuff. And then we'll get it started. As you can see, we have our lovely Shoshana here today, my colleague, who will introduce herself later. So we're all prepped for you, but I see people piling on here, which is great. For you who are here, so just a little bit of technical things. There is a Q&A box button somewhere on your screen, depending on if you're on an iPad or a phone, all this technology. So try to find that. Feel free to ask questions. Shoshana here, who will introduce herself, you'll learn is amazing in many ways, and she can answer a lot of questions about surrogates, screenings, etc. So if you never got the chance ever to ask these questions, take this opportunity by using that Q&A button. We'll get to them at the end. So even if we don't answer directly, we will definitely address all of those. So keep them coming. And I see we still have some people joining here, but we're going to kick this off, and it's going to take about 30 minutes roughly to go through this and see how we screen surrogates at Hatch, which is Shoshana's expertise here. All right, so let me just pull up the presentation here a little bit, and then we can see if people join in as we go ahead. And I hope I'm sharing the right thing. Shoshana, do you see lovely couples here on the screen?
I sure do. They look lovely.
Awesome, perfect. All right, so this is just some of our intended parents here that we just like to kind of start off the meeting about, because this is what it's all about. Even though surrogate screenings is, the topic of today, as you can see, there's lovely intended parents on these pictures, but also lovely surrogates. I don't know, especially I love this picture actually to the right for some reason. It just resonates so well with going through like the journey with your surrogate. She's a part of it, but helping you as a couple, if you're a couple, do this amazing journey. They're on the sidelines, but still obviously having a huge important role. So I just love that picture. All right, so let's look at today's schedule a little bit. So we're going to do a short introduction. We're going to make sure we cover the topics that are important for you, but we will shortly speak about Hatch and PFCLA, just to give you an introduction of who we are, who are you speaking with today, or who's speaking to you rather, to understand what we've done so far and what we would like to achieve in the future. Then we're going to jump into the surrogate screening part. We're going to talk about pre-match surrogate screening. Shoshana is going to lead us on this part. Pre-match surrogate screening is very special. Some intended parents do assume that screenings are done only after you match with a surrogate. Not at Hatch. It's all about pre-match surrogate screening. And then there are some additional screenings after, but we'll cover that later as well. We'll talk about the medical history requirements at PFCLA, which is our in-house IVF clinic. It's short for Pacific Fertility Center, Los Angeles. Obviously, we have our agency screening protocol, which Shoshana will cover, but we also do have our, a clinic's requirements. It doesn't have to be PFCLA. Any clinic that you're working with, if you're not working with our clinic, will also have their medical requirements. So we're going to cover what are they at PFCLA at least, so you get some insight into that. We're going to talk about a typical surrogate profile, and I say typical with the ears because there's nothing typical about an amazing surrogate, but we're going to just walk you through a little bit about what does that profile look like, who could that person be, since we do get a lot of questions about, who are surrogates, what's their background, like motivations, etc. And on the topic of motivations, we will also hear a little bit of reflections from Yusho about, being one director of surrogate community and what that means, but also your experience as a surrogate, because we do get a lot of questions about motivations. What can we expect? What is reasonable to expect from a surrogate and what isn't reasonable, which is a really good question to ask. So we're going to go through all of that as well. And then we'll have a short Q&A at the end. If you do have any questions, like I said, pop them in there whenever, and we will get to those as well. And I'll keep the track of time because I'm really, really bad at that. I usually go way beyond what I should. So hopefully we can keep this within 30 minutes. All right, so today's host is obviously me and Shel here, Shoshana. I am the international manager here at Hatch and our in-house clinic. More importantly, I am a two-time father through surrogacy and donation. I am what we refer to as an international intended parent, meaning that I am not a US domestic kind of IP in that sense. I'm from Europe, so I pursued that journey from there for different reasons. So always happy to speak about that experience, of course, domestic or US or international IPs. And then we have Shoshana. Shoshana, please introduce yourself a little bit here.
Hi, I'm Sho, keeping it short. I'm our director of surrogate community here at Hatch. I've been at Hatch for 15 years. I've been a surrogate for 4 different families from very different backgrounds. And as the director of surrogate community, I help to build community for our existing surrogates and also to bring new amazing surrogates into our surrogate community.
Awesome. And you are a four-time previous surrogate,
Yeah, four
which is
times. And 4 kids
awesome.
of my own. I've had 8 babies.
Yes, that I saw that you put that into like a presentation in another one. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And I love to see the hair changing all the time. That's also
Oh,
amazing. So
thank you.
as you can see all from the picture here, it was pinkish. Now it's a little bit different. Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. So let's talk just very briefly about Hatch and Pacific Fertility Center Los Angeles. So just to give you an idea of who we are and kind of how we vision this journey being as best as it can be and as stress-free as it can be for intended parents. Because the reality is domestic or international, like this is a journey that potentially is filled with kind of anxiety for intended parents, stress, is everything going as it should? How are, securities upheld? How is my baby doing during pregnancy, my surrogate, etc. So what we've done here is that we've built something called the Peace of Mind program. The vision and idea of the Peace of Mind program is to bring that peace of mind to intended parents and surrogates equally, right? So we wanted to bring everything together to make it a bit more seamless. We wanted to have our own agency and our own clinic work very closely together to create those kind of synergy effects. So we wanted a one team experience in one place, agency and clinic, that could offer financial stability for intended parents. Financial stability is something that's really hard to come by in surrogacy, especially on that part rather than the IVF part. So we wanted to create a program not only with one team, but with the fixed fee structure where we could say that we'll take you on this journey, or we'll rather go on this journey together with you, and we'll cover any of the unexpected high variable costs that could occur to give you that predictability in your journey, which is really appreciated. My own experience, my first journey was very up and down as far as costs go. So really kind of stabilizing that is a huge part of what we wanted to do. And we also wanted to achieve medical screenings much earlier in the process, which Shoei will probably touch upon as well. Having our own in-house clinic obviously means that we have our own in-house IVF physicians. Amongst them, somebody that has 30 years of experience of egg donation and surrogacy that actually does pre-records review of the medical records of our applicant surrogates and donors, and also can order uterus lining checks much earlier in the process than any other agency can or will do for that matter. So just like heightening that physician oversight in this area, making sure that we kind of put science first in that sense, and Sho and her team focuses on other aspects, and that creates this peace of mind program and something we think is really great for intended parents looking for this kind of solution. This is one model among many, but this is a great way to pursue this if it suits your scenario and situation. So everything non-medical we do at the Hatch side, and everything medical obviously at the clinical side, covering legal, insurance, embryo transfers, obviously embryo creation, all of that in one place with one team for a fixed fee structure with doctor physician oversight. So that's what we offer here, and that's who we are basically. A little bit about our background. The show actually is one of the, it's funny that I speak about this show actually because you were very early involved in this agency's history, right? How long have you been at Hatch now?
This is my 15th year here, so I learned under our founder,
Yes, Shelley Smith, right?
Shelly Smith. She was incredible.
Yes, I've heard great stories about her. And so Show has been around for 15 years here with Hatch, and we have a lot of staff that has been around for a long, long time with the agency, which is amazing. I'm not as long running, but 33 years of experience, I do not have that. I'm 35, so I was 2 years of age when this agency was created, which is amazing thought to think that I sit here today with you. We serve clients all over the world, including the US, of course, the main domestic market, but also across 55 countries around the world, which is just mind-boggling and amazing. 3,300 happy, healthy birds, very high success rate in donor surrogacy cycles. For you using your own embryos or eggs to create embryos, should discuss this with our medical doctors when it comes to success rates, because it's obviously different using a donor versus using own eggs. We need to know more about your situation and background. All of our staff are experienced surrogates and IPs. We have a nice slide of Show's team, which is just like a bunch of previous surrogates. So very much a surrogacy powered program, which brings great experience. That balance between professional, structured and organized, and personal experience. That's what we're striving for. And like I mentioned, top candidates, applicants, surrogates, donors with physician oversight. It's a great benefit we have in-house. So that's a little bit about what we've done so far. So now let's talk about a little bit more about surrogate screening and the topic that's really what people are here for. So I'm going to kick it off a little bit, and then we're going to turn it over to you, Show, so you can give us the details of what you all do. And here's that amazing slide of some of our staff that actually are previous surrogates, which is amazing. Such a great experience to have in-house and just kind of drive from that perspective of surrogates. So I'm assuming, I've never been a part of that process, Show, but that's people that are considering being surrogates really highly appreciate having you all guide them through this as previous surrogates, right?
We're often the first surrogate they've ever spoken with in real life, so it's very valuable. And I have to laugh. Look at the slide. There's my hair, a different color.
It is. Yes, yet again.
I
But
kept it
that's fun.
natural for so long in pregnancy, so now I'm really enjoying changing the colors that I've retired as a surrogate.
Very responsible. Now you can go wild. All right, perfect. So that's such a nice slide. All right, so I'm going to talk just like very broadly about this, and then we'll hand it over to Show for the details. The pre-match surrogate screenings are very different. I think sometimes when I speak to intended parents, they assume that any agency out there in the US would have a certain screening protocol. It's very far from the truth. There are some recommendations from the American Society of Reproductive Medicine or the Society of Ethics of Egg Donation and Surrogacy. There might be things to kind of work off of there, but agencies are not necessarily part of those organizations. So it can vary a lot from agency to agency, but there are some key factors to look out for. And I think that we go way beyond, the basics of what we do. How we find surrogates is also interesting because people do wonder about motivations, etc., which brings them to that kind of question. We get surrogates from referrals from previous Hatch surrogates, meaning that Show and her team has done an amazing job. Amanda, the director of case management, and her team has done an amazing job. Our director of matching, of course, Janice, that matches the surrogate with the IPs first, has done an amazing job. And now people refer friends, family members, or return themselves as surrogates. A very good kind of receipt of the good work that's been done. And we also do advertisements, like it's 2025, nobody can get away from that, to kind of recruit surrogates and screen them, and also events. I know, Show, you hosted some events, was it last year or the year before that, in person actually, for promising kind of surrogates or interested surrogates, right?
Yeah, we had an event at the Madonna Inn. It was very fun.
Nice. So that's always great to see people in person, obviously. So from all of these kind of different sources, we screen surrogates, which Show will explain, and we get about 2 to 5% of candidates accepted, which sometimes surprises people. But yes, it's that tough and it's that important to be thorough and safe in this process that that's the actual amount that we kind of get with in the end. We also want to understand, obviously, candidates' history, previous pregnancies, previous deliveries, etc., which Show will talk about, but also motivation. With the US having a compensated model for surrogates, it does come into kind of question a lot about motivations, and that's something we're really conscious about, not having financial motivations, for example. So Show will explain this, how it starts off with the application and with interviews, quite a few interviews actually, which also surprises IPs sometimes, and maybe surrogates as well, Show, about the amount of work that goes into this. As well as a virtual home tour, which I think is great. I would love to see people's homes. That's so interesting. It gives you a lot of kind of background on them. And then medical records is also important, which Show will talk about, and how we collect those, which could be different also from agency to agency. And having our doctor in-house, there is just the last kind of thing we want to put a pressure point on, which is a huge disadvantage of having this, just heightening actually lowering the risks of medical disqualifications for the surrogates, which is a tough thing for them, of course, and the intended parents, going back again, rematching. So this is great to have somebody with this caliber review medical records, etc., before we actually match or accept people, which is amazing. And some of our amazing staff there, all of the directors, obviously, from these departments, as you can see, are previous surrogates, which is also an amazing experience. All right, Show. So walk us through a little bit then the step-by-step process, how it actually works. How do we screen surrogates at Hatch?
Happily. So surrogates get to us a number of ways before they apply. So as Edmund mentioned, we do get a number of referrals, something that my department focuses on a great deal. But we also get surrogates who find us organically through our ads, through their own research, just Googling. So we get surrogates all different ways, but everyone starts off doing the same first step, which is our extensive surrogate application. So that's an online application that walks them through the qualifications to be a surrogate. Some of the questions are really black and white and are automatic disqualifiers, so we'll know early in if they don't qualify, but a lot of them are more gray areas that'll need to be felt out in later stages of the process. So they complete that application, takes them about 30 minutes to an hour. They do it from home. And then we get that application in real time. That application's reviewed and then approved for either next steps or declined, or if additional information is needed, then we get that before having the next full call. and then they'll be booked for their initial Zoom call. So for that Zoom call, they're going to be working with one of our surrogate specialists. Our surrogate specialists are experienced surrogates themselves, like everybody in our department. And they're going to have an in-depth conversation, really getting to know the candidates, because a lot of what we do in our screening is social screening. So while they'll have all these other components of screening, getting to know a person is so valuable in one that they feel supported and they feel seen at Hatch, so they want to stay with us, but also that we get to really know their motivation, really know what they're looking for in their intended parent match to be able to make a great match for them later. So that initial call happens. Sometimes there's follow-up calls depending on how much education they need at the process, because in this stage, we're also educating them so that when they get to further steps, they know what to expect. So while a lot of programs focus on just screening candidates, are they qualified? Great, move them along. We want to make sure our candidates are really prepared for the journey, that they've thought about the things that can come up along the way, so that when they get into later stages, there aren't surprises. They're on board for what could lie ahead. And that makes for a smoother journey all around for everybody. So assuming that they do that initial Zoom call and everything looks great, they're going to move in then to their welcome Zoom call. And that welcome Zoom call will put them with their advocate. And their advocate is going to be their point of contact for the rest of their time in our admissions process. So advocates, also being experienced surrogates, will be able to share their own experience and knowledge, and they're going to dive even deeper into what they want out of this process and talking about some of the really important key things that can come up. One of those being termination and reduction. I know it's a topic that not a lot of people like to talk about. It's sad. We hope that it never comes up for anybody, but we want to make sure that our surrogates are okay with the parents making those decisions for their baby in the cases of serious defects, disabilities, higher level multiple splits, if embryo split and there's twins or triplets, whether to reduce or not. Those decisions rest with the intended parents. And so we only work with surrogates who are willing to let the parents make those tougher choices. And on the flip side of that, a surrogate's health does come first and her safety does come first. And if there ever is a hard decision to be made, then that's going to be taken into consideration, because she is first and foremost a mother herself. So that's that collaborative part of surrogacy. So we find out even how she feels about things like life support. I'm so happy to say at Hatch, we've never had a case where this has ever come up. We screen our surrogates very well to make sure that they are as low risk as possible, but our surrogates do agree to remain on life support in the event something did happen. Best example I can give would be, say, like a car accident, something unexpected, unrelated to the surrogacy, to remain on life support to finish their journey out and deliver hopefully a healthy baby in the end. So we have to talk about some very hard things with our surrogates. And because of that, we spend a lot of time getting to know them, making sure that they're comfortable, because it's a very intense process to become a surrogate. They have their medical records reviewed. So key part of medical records is how those are collected. Some agencies will accept records from kind of just anywhere. They'll let the surrogates provide the records. The problem is when records don't go straight from a facility to us, we don't know how complete they are. We don't know, I would never assume a surrogate would tamper with the records. We don't want to leave that opportunity. So we take all those records directly from facilities to make sure we have the most complete records. Those records get reviewed by our in-house team to make sure that they are as complete as possible and do follow-ups for anything that might be missing. So we get every set of records that's still available for her pregnancies, her deliveries, her well woman care, any IVF if she's been a surrogate or gone through fertility care herself, say, if she's in a same-sex relationship and went through IVF or reciprocal IVF. We want to make sure we have all those details. We get current PAPs, we get OB clearance letters. So it's very extensive, everything that we're going to collect just in that medical records bucket to make sure we have a really good picture holistically of how healthy she is as a candidate and of any issues that might recur in pregnancy. Once all those records are collected, they get reviewed by our medical director, Dr. Viken Sahakian, who is, gosh, he got like 30 years of experience, I believe. I mean, he's been doing this about as long as we have on the agency side, or pretty much neck and neck. So he does a review of those records as well to say if someone's a good medical candidate or let us know if there's any additional testing that needs to be done. So in some cases, we'll even do follow-up testing. We organize things like A1C tests, toxicology screens, anything that we need to clear any concerns that could have been in the records before they move on to next steps. So assuming all of that looks good, they move into background checks. And background checks are for the surrogate, as well as any adults in their household and any partners, even if the partners don't reside with them. Adults in the household is obviously because they're going to be around them during the pregnancy. We want to make sure there's no violent crimes or concerns there for her health or safety. And for partners, even if they're not living together, we know that that can evolve and change during the course of surrogacy. People get closer, people break up, life happens. We want to make sure that whoever she's in contact with, we know that there's no concerning criminal history there. We want to make sure that she has none herself. So while maybe somebody had, a parking ticket in their 20s, we're not going to disqualify them from that. People have lived life, they're humans. But if they had like a recent DUI, if they had any kind of violent arrest, those are the things that would be automatic disqualifiers. We also look at how we support our surrogates by identifying their on-the-ground support system around them. So while we offer a very supportive program, we are not there physically in person every day with our surrogates, making sure that they're supported much as we'd love to be. So we want to make sure we know at least one support person who's going to be there with them throughout the journey, and that we educate them as well in the process so that they know what to expect and how best to support the surrogate. If she has a partner, it's going to automatically be her partner. But if she's a single surrogate, it could be mom, it could be best friend, it could be close neighbor, whoever it is that's going to be boots on the ground, really supporting her through this journey, because everybody needs a support system to get through this. And then we have our mock cycle and lining check. Now, this is very special to our program because we are connected to a clinic. We're able to offer a mock cycle and lining check as part of our screening process pre-match. Every program, or every clinic, I should say, will do this type of lining check once you're already matched with the surrogate. But at that point, you've met her. Sometimes you've met her family. You've made a connection with them. You're attached. And then sometimes you get really bad news that her lining's not right. And some things are fixable, like, doing a mock cycle to see if she responds to the medications and builds a thicker lining than her natural lining. Great. Sometimes that works. Sometimes there are serious things that can't be fixed, like uterine abnormalities, scars and lining, polyps or fibroid cysts, things that couldn't be removed. And those really depend on location, and they vary so greatly. So it really has to be visually seen to know if someone can pass a lining check. So mock cycles are done in the case that they were on any kind of hormonal birth control recently, things like IUDs, the birth control pill, the patch, the depot shot. Lining checks are done in the absence of any hormonal birth control methods. They can just do a lining check. And if a lining check doesn't pass, then a follow-up mock is done to make sure they respond to medications, because it could just be where they caught them in the timing of their lining. But this is really reassuring, because once you're matched, if that lining check has been good, you know that their chance of clearing the in-person medical screening post-match is very high. We see so few people not clear if their lining is good. And then we move on to psychological screening for the surrogate and her partner. So we work with some incredible, vetted, experienced, licensed mental health professionals who specialize in surrogacy, and they conduct an interview with the surrogate and her partner if applicable. If she has a partner, they will be interviewed. But if they're a single surrogate, then it would just be the surrogate. It's an in-depth conversation talking about a lot of the things we've already talked about in the process with them, but this is somebody who is specifically trained to spot issues psychologically, to really feel out if there's any underlying concerns that could come up during the surrogacy and her mental health. They also administer a test called a PAI. It's a personality test. It screens for major psychological disorders, things like bipolar disorder, for example, which is an automatic disqualifier for our program. And it also checks for motivational fit and personality, so we know who we're working with, how best to match them, and if surrogacy is a good fit for them. And we get a very detailed report that will go straight to your doctor to make sure that their doctor also agrees that the psychological profile is right for surrogacy. After all this is done, we also provide an educational video, in fact, more than one in the process, but there's one upon completion of the screening process to really prepare them for the next steps and make sure they understand all of the things that they're responsible for as a surrogate to help the journey go smoothly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for walking us through that. And I think anybody that
It's a lot, huh?
hears or sees this, yes, they realize that, wow, it does take a lot to even, consider doing this, which brings me back a little bit about motivations, right? So I know, we're going to talk about this with you a little bit later, but I think it's really interesting from like that motivation kind of perspective, that becoming a surrogate is nothing you do lightly, and it takes a lot of work and effort, even if after you decided to actually do that and apply for a program. So I always love hearing this, because then, as an intended parent, you realize that the person on that other end of that screen one day has, not only decided to become a surrogate, she has been through so much to even get to that stage, which tells me a lot about their commitment and wish to really do this, which is why the agency screening is so important, but unfortunately not done this thoroughly everywhere. So I really appreciate you walking us through that, and I think it's really helpful for a lot of people. Awesome show. These are some medical history requirements. This is obviously recorded and going to be sent out to you, so I don't think we have to go through that in detail. It's kind of self-explanatory, as you can see here. So we'll make sure to get that out for you. But this is what I was talking about, the clinics kind of perspective. Clinics might have different requirements. Keep that in mind. So this is the Pacific Fertility Center, kind of our requirements in that end, or the clinics. Is there anything that stands out here, show that you want to comment on? Because then, if not, I think that, it's kind of self-explanatory. Is there anything you want to lift up that you think is important here?
I think it's really important that what you really trust the clinic to decide the medical qualifications as a surrogate. I know oftentimes parents come to the table with a lot of preconceptions of what a surrogate should look like, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. but your clinic is going to know best what is going to be a recipe for success. So I say it's good to really rely on your agency for the social screening and your clinic for the medical parts, and to not create barriers in matching based off preconceptions, or even I should say Google searches. I know a lot of people like to like Dr.
Yeah.
Google, and it really hurts them in their matching process.
It does, and it does for the IP part, like you were saying as well, like googling around, trying to kind of find answers, and there are answers out there, but they're not as nuanced as the reality is. So I agree with you. Do not create obstacles for yourselves. Listen to your experts, clinic or agency, and obviously ask a ton of questions. But especially medically, I agree with you. So it's kind of like let the doctor kind of decide on that end because they know what they're doing there. All right, so everything that we kind of walked you through there, just to kind of emphasize that again, should be done before a surrogate is ever presented as a potential match. There are some things there that we mentioned, a lot of things actually, but let's say the uterus lining check that show kind of emphasize that that isn't done anywhere else. So it's really important to try to get as much as done as early as possible to not get these disappointing rematches that take not only your emotions and that commitment out of it, but also timing. Timeline is important for our intended parents, and you're going back again. You're finding a new surrogate. You're rematching, which is okay. That but it does take some time to do that again. I know there's even agencies with an 8 month rematch time just to like rematch after you've had a match. So it's important to get it right the first time around, which is why we're keeping it so tight and strict on the screenings. Um, Maybe you show walk us through this a little bit if you don't mind. I mean, you've met
Absolutely.
more surrogates than I have ever had met. So walk us through a little bit of when you screen surrogates and what you see, the ones that actually make through it. Like, who is the typical surrogate? If you have anything in addition to this, please feel free to freestyle a little bit about that as well.
Yep, happy to. So a typical surrogate, they generally have some of the same qualities. They are going to be mid to late 30s. That's sort of the average age where people are in a stable situation, done completing their families. Many surrogates have already completed their families before pursuing surrogacy, although it's not a hard requirement. They do have to be okay with the risk, for fertility if they're going to carry for someone else. So many have already completed their families before deciding to do this. But we get surrogates from a good age range from 21 up to 42. It really doesn't make a difference as long as they're in a really stable situation emotionally, mentally, socially. They, and weight wise, tend to be average to full figure build because they've had multiple pregnancies. They're keeping up with kids. So BMI can go up to, 30 to 32. Most are not, most are not athletes. They're busy moms. They have high school diplomas more often than not for their education status, but we do see some with junior college, trade schools, and occasionally we do see people with higher education, but often they're more working class. They have one or more children of their own that they're raising. That is a hard requirement to be a surrogate per ASRM, per seeds. A surrogate has to have given birth to at least one child that she is raising, and we always look into any kind of custody issues. So we want to make sure that a surrogate has custody of all of her children. That there's a healthy history of pregnancies and deliveries. So this gets vetted through medical records, making sure that she's not high risk of other pregnancy complications recurring that she may have had before. We want to make sure that they're in a stable, happy living situation. So that's the support system. That's just getting to know them well, hearing about what their lives are like, seeing what their job is like. Do they like where they're working? Is it safe for pregnancy? So there's a lot of things that factor into, is this a happy, stable social situation? They are humanitarian women with big hearts, highly motivated to help others. The thing we hear from our surrogates is that they just really want to have somebody, help somebody have what they have. They want to help somebody have a baby because they love their own family so much. And I know that certainly was a draw for me in doing this. Now, some are single moms with support systems consisting of friends, family, and others are married and depend mostly on their partner. And some are a hybrid, where they have a support system built of all different types of people, but we want to make sure there's always a good support system in place. There's no reason someone who's a single parent can't be a wonderful, stable surrogate. We've had so many single moms over the years. And single moms, I think, honestly, sometimes build out the best networks because they don't have a partner to lean on. They tend to build
Yeah.
a wider net of people in their lives who can help with different things than somebody who's married.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing that. And I know when I started my first journey, I was very curious about, how does that even look like? Who is that person, and what's their background, etc. So I think that's great that you walked us through that a little bit of how they kind of look. All right, so I feel like we covered some of these things here, kind of the women that apply to become surrogate, etc. But I think we can still speak about some of these things and more kind of focusing on the last bit here, show. I see we got some questions. Just keep them coming. We'll get to them in the end. Kind of expectations, right? Because obviously, two parties meeting, like in any kind of social construct in our society, there's expectations on both sides of how this journey should look and what you can expect. So there are reasonable expectations and sometimes there are unreasonable expectations on both ends. For our IPs a little bit, can you kind of talk a little bit about what expectations are reasonable as far as kind of what I want my surrogate to be like or come from or what kind of background, like what is more kind of like the reasonable things? And if you want to shoot in something that's kind of like a little bit of like unreasonable or unnecessary to kind of put on as a requirement and put that extra challenge towards yourself, like can you just speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So I think it's reasonable to expect your surrogate to be honest, communicative, and responsible. I think those are probably some of the three key things that you want your surrogate to be. And that can look a lot of different ways. And consider, I like to get the perspective of these are surrogates, they've become parents, they've lived life. Some of us weren't perfect teenagers, some of us weren't perfect young adults, but we're wonderful, responsible adults who are great parents. And I'm sure, intended parents kind of reflect on their own journey. It may not always be spotless. So I think keeping in mind that this is a human process and humans are messy sometimes. So I would never say expect a perfect spotless candidate who is a straight A student, never got a parking ticket, graduated summa cum laude. Like, we're not building up. A surrogate is a superhero because of what she is willing to do and what she is pouring into this. And that alone should, I think, garner, respect and trust that she is trusting you with a child for the rest of their life, and you're trusting her with your child for the most critical 9 months. You have to enter this process with that mutual trust. So I really advise expectations be reasonable. Don't ask a surrogate to do something that you wouldn't do yourself in a pregnancy, and also consider the things that maybe things you do if it was your pregnancy would be different than how she would carry herself, bearing in mind that she has carried healthily to term before, so she knows what she's doing. She's had success in doing it before. That being said, sometimes parents do have specific things they do want, and some things are reasonable as long as they're disclosed before the matching process. So if we know intended parents want a surrogate who's willing to eat mostly organic, they provide a meal allowance to cover that cost. That's not unreasonable as long as the surrogate knows that. It is hard to come up with things that you want later once you've already matched to say, okay, now I want you to agree to do acupuncture every single week to help the pregnancy. That might have been great pre-match for a surrogate who loves acupuncture, but somebody who doesn't want to do any more needles than they're required already in the process might be a nightmare, right? So that transparency of expectations in the beginning is so helpful.
Yeah,
not
I do
doing
like
things
that
that are
part.
going, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just going to say, I think that's a really important part, that expectations can, even if they're unreasonable, could be fine, right? But at the right time, which I think is a really good thing to get put in there, that a surrogacy agreement with your attorney, and the surrogate has her attorney, could be the perfect time to put forward reasonable and unreasonable requirements, and kind of walk you through with their legal attorneys about what is reasonable, what isn't. But like you said, just like blindsiding your surrogate about something that was totally not discussed before is probably quite a bad idea. So the right expectations at the right time is
On
a
both
great
sides, on
thing.
both
On both
sides.
sides. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
yeah, and we would even advise that before you get into contracts. It's really good to do that when you have your match meeting. So you'll have a facilitated match meeting with one of our match specialists, Janice or Kylie, who are both experienced surrogates, and they're going to take you through those things. So that's a really good time to make sure you're on the same page about what you want communication to look like. If you want to come in person to appointments, if you want to be able to record certain things, if the clinic or hospital allows you to, those are all really good things to talk about very early on. And that's what those conversations are really aimed at figuring out. What you don't want to do is set requirements for your surrogate that disrupt her life so much that it adds stress while she's pregnant. So they're already busy moms. Even the most organized person, is still juggling a lot as a mom. Even if they have only one child, it still can be all consuming sometimes. So remembering that your surrogate is also a parent herself and being considerate of that will really help as you're deciding, what's reasonable and what's not.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think we cover a lot of these other things about disqualification, etc. I think it's kind of clear from your wonderful presentation. So we're going to take some questions, see if there are any. If you do want to speak to us about anything on the IP side, obviously, if you're here listening in as a potential surrogate, please go to the Hatch website and register there to become a surrogate. And you'll meet one of the lovely team members of Shoshana's, who I've met myself, and they are amazing, lovely women that will take the best care of you. If you're an intended parent, I can promise you the same on that other end. But with me or some of our other team members here, you can just send us an email. You can go to Hatch and put in your info there. You'll be redirected if you're a domestic or international IP. So please do that. All right, so let's see if we have any questions here. I'm always horrible at this. Let me try to pull this up. All right. Somebody's thanking our wonderful show, of course, for our excellent walkthrough. Top concerns is the process, of course, that a person choosing to be our surrogate is really informed and willing, so which is great, which you explained. The personal concern is more about that the IP is being less attractive to surrogates as they hope to use their own embryos, and in this case, the chance of success are, of course, lower. All right. So
Good
worry is
question.
about own embryos, and in this case, being less desirable. From an intended parent perspective, or like from that IP coordination part, you are definitely not less kind of desirable from a surrogate to help you just because you're using your own embryos. Absolutely not. A lot of our clients here are straight couples, for example, that are using their own eggs or semen to create embryos, and you work with the surrogates because they have a medical need for surrogacy. So I think that this is something that does come up in consultations, like how will we as IPs be accepted by a surrogate because of our embryos, our age, our being single, etc. And Shoshana, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a lovely, diverse pool of surrogates, usually at one time, that want to carry for gay couples, straight couples, singles, anything in between. So I think there's a good fit for everybody. What do you say about that, Shoshana?
I absolutely agree. I'd say it's a lid for every pot, not the same lid for every pot. And I've done the surrogate sampler. I've carried for a single mom, a same-sex couple, a international couple, and a domestic couple. So I've done a little bit of everything, and they were all so special. So when we talk to candidates, we find out what it is they're looking for, what they're open to, and we want to make sure it's the right fit. So I certainly using your own embryos would not be deter a surrogate. It would just make sure we want the right fit, somebody who knows, that maybe it'll take more than one transfer. We do prepare all of our surrogates for up to 3 transfers, for success. That tends to be kind of the max that we see needed in most cases.
Yeah, and I do. When I read this question again, I do also realize that lower kind of success comes from the medical point of view. Like that would be lower medical success, meaning that the surrogates will feel less attracted to that kind of choice. Just know that at Hatch, we do actually require to work with PGTA tested normal embryos. So we do have a requirement of 2 at least, just to give that surrogate and yourself some kind of reassurance that there's not only one shot at this, like we do have a second shot. Hopefully, we can even create more embryos, but at least having that. So we do have that as a kind of balance board there. So I do understand the question; it is reasonable. But surrogates do want to succeed, and that might help if you do have more than one embryo, and especially if they're tested. That's what our surrogates usually also want. But
Mhm.
don't feel deterred or like because you're only using your own embryos. As long as we have a good grading and the doctor, believes in this, there's no reason that a surrogate wouldn't do that. And then we have a question which I love when intended parents ask these questions. It gives me a good insight into what kind of intended parents they are, about being generally respectful and thankful. So, Shan, I think this is for you. Could you give any tips on anything IPs can do to make the surrogate feel seen and fully respected in this process, so it's not like unbalanced between the IPs and surrogate?
Well, first, I love that you're asking it. It's such a great place to come from when you're just getting started and something that your surrogate will really appreciate. Seeing her as a person is what's going to help the most. So when you communicate, make sure you're not just communicating about the pregnancy. How are your kids doing? Remembering details, remembering their names, wishing people happy birthday on birthdays. Those little things go a long way to build a human connection. And surrogates want to do that with you as well. So they want to know how your day's going, what your interests are. If you're going to a concert, they love to hear about that. We love getting pictures of, what your life's like, because we're thinking about what that child's life is going to be like with you. So if we know you've got a happy, life and fun interest, we know that you're going to share that with your child. So those little things really help to
Yeah.
make the connection. But honestly, just saying thank you, on the hard days. Sometimes it's hard. Pregnancy can be really tough. People get nauseous, they get tired, their feet swell, all the fun things happen. And just thank you so much for going through this for me goes such a long way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that even like you said, Shoshana, sometimes it's tough. Not everything always works great. There might be bumps in the road and challenges. That's not unusual. Something that we can take care of as an agency, of course, but still something important. And I remember we had our surrogate go through some hardships, etc., during the journey. And we just wanted to make sure she knew that we were still there, even though we're not physically there, obviously being, in Europe. So I remember we sent her flowers, and something that you don't have to do. Sometimes people worry about like there's this kind of gifting program I need to keep up with. It's not the case, and it doesn't have to be flowers or something symbolic like that, but it does give kind of just support, additional support, reminding her that she's not alone. I think is a great thing when it's rough. Just kind of it helps just to remember that okay, there are actually people out there that do exist. They're not just on my phone, and they're actually sending me flowers, maybe because I'm going through some a tough time. So, but I agree with you, Shoshana. I think that any normal individual, mutual respect and understanding and grace, gratefulness is really the only thing it takes to create a great relationship between a surrogate and IP.
And the little gifts
Um,
are very thoughtful. I will say those things always are appreciated. You know, I was being really sweet. My intended parents, when they came out for transfer, brought something for my toddler at the time. They brought her a little outfit that's now been handed down for generations because I went on to have more of my own after that. But those little things do matter, not because of it doesn't, it's not about expensive gifts. It's the thought that went into it. Like they remember like a favorite animal of my kid and bring like, a stuffed animal. It's little things like that that show that you were listening and you care. They do go a
Agreed.
long way. It doesn't have to break the bank.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think like, people worry a lot about communication, which I also think is important. Like, having like regular communication, like a lot of agencies like Hatch, we do really require communication between intended parents and surrogates weekly, which also might look differently, right? Like, sometimes it's a text message. I usually joke that I sometimes sent a picture of my lunch to my surrogate, like I'm having tacos. And she was like, I'm doing spaghetti. And that was it for the day. But we knew that we cared enough about sharing our little bit of that day because we're in it together. So I think the small things, like you said, it's not about finances, it's not about breaking the bank, it's not about lavish gestures, it's about small like insight into each other's lives and sharing that with each other. That helps for sure, I think. Great question. I agree with you, Show. That shows a lot of initiative on this person's end. All right. Anybody else? I see we still have a bunch of people in here. Anybody that wants to throw in the last question here before we say goodbye? Take the chance here. If not, then I want to thank you so much for joining us. We're going to stick around for another minute just to see if there is a question or two. But if you have to go back to your busy lives, work, etc., kids, planning for surrogacy, I know it's a lot at once. Then we want to thank you so much, and please join us for other sessions. We have a full year of webinars that we're going to host monthly. You can sign up for any of them, and we'll send you the recordings afterwards as well. I don't see any questions for now. Maybe one last question we actually did. Oh, thank you for your time. Very considerate. Thank you so much for joining. All right, well, then I'm going to wrap it up. Show, thank you so much for taking some time here from your busy schedule.
My pleasure.
And you've been great to have on here. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everyone.